Hi, Sheila. And
Hi.
first of all, thank you for accepting InQuiete's invite. This is a conversation I very much hope for. So I'm really happy to be here with you today. I was reflecting on what to say, how to tackle such an incredibly, disorienting and confounding issue such as the pandemic and all its effects. And I kept thinking of this book that I have recently read, which is Feminist City by Leslie Kern. Leslie Kern is a feminist geographer, and in her book, she states something which maybe it's a little bit straightforward, but it's also very powerful, that from the women perspective, the idea of the city and the idea of freedom are deeply connected, and as if to say that we go to city to be free to live on our terms. I also would like to say that all restless women, as we could translate InQuiete, love the city. And I think it's something that we frequently see in films and series, and I think it's something very pervasive in your work. And I'm not only talking about how should a person be, but also motherhood, where, in my opinion, the relationship with friends are very crucial in the development of the protagonist.
Mhm.
So in your book, there is always this idea that moving somewhere can help you, even if it's only something potential. So I feel that the reason that we put up with cities, which are not exactly the healthiest place to live or the cheapest place to live, are this. So today, the health emergency has caused a disruption of this possibility, as caused an halt to our freedom to move. And I would like to ask you to expand from here, maybe talking a little bit about your relationship with cities and how it has changed in the past year, not just about your daily life or daily task, which I think we managed to keep similar to the past, but regarding the potential that is attached to cities.
Well, one thing that I wasn't aware of before is that so I live in Toronto, and in December, so 3 months before the pandemic started, like in earnest, and the lockdowns began, my boyfriend and I moved. Well, we got a place 2 hours outside the city, so we still have our apartment in Toronto, but we have a second place as well. And I thought I would just go there to write, or we would go there on the weekend. But then when everything shut down, my boyfriend couldn't work. So we just ended up living there for 6 months. So I was even more outside the city than I've ever been in my whole life. And I don't think, I think being in nature is its own kind of freedom as well. I think that, you even could say that that there's a feminist aspect to the kind of freedom that you can get in nature, because it's not culture. It's just, there's nothing oppressive about being around trees, the way that there can be being around people and the structures that we've created. But I did miss the city all the same. And what I missed was not only participating in it myself, but knowing that other people in other places, the fact that I knew that other people in other places weren't participating in city life made writing feel very different. So the fact that I knew that people weren't having conversations at parties or in bars or at universities or in living rooms, that none of that was happening really anywhere in the world, made it feel like, there's no space for writing to go into. I hadn't quite realized that extent to which I think about writing as something that spurs conversation among people. It's not just for the solitary reader, it's for there to be a conversation. And so knowing that conversations like that weren't really happening because the cities were shut down made writing feel like a much more purposeless activity. And it was a very depressing feeling. And I realized how much I've never been interested in being in a family. I've never wanted a family, but I've always wanted to be in culture. And that for me is like being in a family. You have a sense of participating in something that's important and that involves other people that you love. Like I feel a lot of love for everybody that I communicate with, about art. And that just sort of disappeared. I mean, even friends who have children, they became busier. Everyone just kind of fell away. And I almost felt like we'd sort of all taken for granted that we were important to each other. And then that was called into question, like, how important are we all for each other? What are these relationships really made of? So for me, the breakdown of the city and like the freedom to participate in culture, made writing seem like I didn't even really know it was for those months. But I hadn't realized before that was something that made it feel meaningful. The fact that I knew that people were having conversations, not even about my work, just about art and culture and life and everything, Yeah. And the book is part of a conversation. It's part of a cultural conversation. So that was gone. So.
Yeah, I think we are going back to these topics later on, but for this moment, I would like to talk a little bit about the work you are doing with your diaries. A couple of months ago, you shared with me this book that you are working on, and it's about your diaries from 2010 to 2019, I guess, organized by alphabetical order. And it's something that you have already done in the past. And commenting your experience on working with diaries, you say how much.
Oh my goodness, sorry.
You say how much they gave you the idea that 10 years can be just like a single moment.
Sorry, Sara. We will have to start again.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was on.
Pretending like the cell phones never ring.
Okay, let's start again. Sorry.
Okay. So, Sheila, a couple of months ago, you shared with me a book you are working on.
Sorry.
Oh?
We have to start again, but you have to leave 2 seconds
Okay.
after I stop speaking because.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't realize you were speaking.
Okay.
So a couple of months ago, you shared with me a book you were working on, and it's about your diaries from 2010 to 2019, organized by alphabetical order. And it's something you have already done in the past. And commenting about your experiment with diaries, you say how much they gave you the idea that 10 years could be just a single moment, a single state, that we have this expectation of change and evolution, that events should alter our life, but they're never quite strong enough to do so. And maybe because it's something unexpected and it's something that we have never seen or experienced before, and maybe because it's also affecting us for long enough, and it's also, I think, deeply reassuring. But we think that the pandemic will change us, will mark our inner life, even maybe the profound sense of self. And so first of all, I would like to ask you to describe a little bit this experience of rewriting 10 years of your life and finding them and yourself not dramatically change. And you say it was something really depressing, but also reassuring. So I would like you to, describe me a little bit the process.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, the project I started working on it 10 years ago. I think the diaries were like 2005 to 2010 at that point. And I wanted to see how much I'd changed in that time. And the way that I thought that I could do that somehow was by, taking each sentence in those years of diaries, hundreds of thousands of words, and putting them alphabetical. So the first chapter is all the sentences that start with A, and then, you know, all the way to Z. And I was thinking by ordering them alphabetically instead of chronologically, I could see how much repetition there was, like how many times in 5 years I'd said, you know, I want to leave Toronto, for example. And, you know, over the last 10 years, I keep adding to it and then editing it and looking at it. And, you know, like you said in your question, what I found was that it's not clear that this sentence is from 10 years earlier and this sentence is from 10 years later. They seem like they could all be from the same year or the same month. There isn't that much change. And it is kind of depressing because we think that the purpose of life is to, or I've always assumed that the purpose of life is to change and grow and learn and, you know, sort of evolve. And what the diaries show is something completely the opposite, which is that you are this, it's like you're this color or you're this shape that just maintains itself through time. And it has little subtle variations. Maybe if the light hits it in one direction or the light hits it in another direction, it shows a little bit a different quality. But essentially, no, you're just this object that, and you know what, it's actually interesting because I met a girl in the park the other day and she just talked to me and she didn't listen to anything I was saying. And I felt really bad. I was like, nothing I said had any impact on her. This is supposed to be a conversation. And I spoke to a friend of mine who knows her and he said, oh yeah, she came over and she talked to me and my girlfriend for 2 hours and didn't hear anything we said. So she's just the same with everybody. You know, and we're just the same in some way throughout our lives. That's what the diaries show. So in any case, it's depressing, but then there's also something kind of reassuring about it. Like, that's all you need to be. And you can sort of take comfort in that because, you know, things can throw you off. I mean, you know, my father died 2 years ago. That really threw me off. You know, for the last 2 years, I felt kind of upside down. But then you kind of right yourself again and you're back to much of the same qualities that you always had. And it's nice that we're resilient and that we're one thing and we only have to be one thing. It's not, I don't know, but I think the pandemic is a strange time for narrative because everything kind of stopped. So in same way, I felt like I was living the same day over and over again for 6 months, you know.
Yeah. And I would like to ask you something about it, but before that, I would say that maybe life is not just like a video game and you complete a level and then a level and then a level. Maybe it's just like a series of different scenarios in which we participate.
Yeah.
And so regarding, of course, the pandemic, I would like to ask you how writing diaries has changed in the past year, not only like how they look right now, whether you're writing them or not, or if they have changed form and structure, but also like trying to imagine yourself like in 5 or 10 years from now and ask yourself if this change will stick or not. Because I think we like put so much faith in this time to be like a crucial point, like a turn point of our life, but I'm not quite sure it will be.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, I think of it as kind of a pause. It hasn't really changed my internal life very much. I haven't been writing diaries, but that's not because of the pandemic. I just don't write them as much anymore. Since doing this project, I've kind of lost interest in writing diaries. But I think what the pandemic has changed for me is I'm a little surprised by who is in my life more than they were before and who's dropped away. It's sort of reshuffled my friendships in some way. I found myself craving certain people who I wasn't as close to previously. So I think that might be a more lasting shift. You know, and when you only can see 2 or 3 people, it makes it really stark, you know, who you love. So I think that's going to be how it affects the future in some way. But I don't know. I think so I haven't been writing diaries, but I had to write a few essays. I was assigned a few essays to write. And both of the editors took about 4 months to get me my edits back. So, because they were busy, you know, everything's been thrown upside down. So when I got the essays back, it was like reading them freshly, you know, I couldn't remember what I had written. So I read them, and I was very surprised that the two essays shared the same quality. They were both very bad essays in the end, I realized, because there was no narrative progression. There was no sense of here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end, or here's an argument. It's like any paragraph could have, it was like a mush, you know, and I think that's because that's what the time felt like. It just felt like a mush without a beginning. You didn't know when the end was coming, if it would ever come. I think that was the hardest thing about one of the hard things about the pandemic was not knowing when this period was going to end, if ever. And I feel like the essays reflected that. Yeah. So it's interesting to me that the shape of your life can't help but be reflected in the shape of what you write. So, but it was no shape, you know, the essays had no shape, just like life during that time kind of had no shape.
Yeah, there was like no narrative in that.
Yeah,
time.
No change,
Yeah.
No surprise.
Yeah, like no good surprises.
Yeah.
And reading your diaries, your 10 years of memories organized in such an unusual order, what really emerged is what you are obsessed with, what is really on your mind all the time. And one of these things, of course, is like commitment, focus. You always write about it. And you always like have this craving for this uninterrupted time to work on your books, not being distracted by the outside world. And I think the lockdown has done like lots of things, but one thing that has done is it has dissolved the outside world. It has made it very distant and even inaccessible to us. And so at once all the distraction of the, you know, the mundane life were erased. But how has this impacted the writing? And but not just, you know, your ability to do so, but also your urge to write. How much all that, you know, everyday life, all that background noise is still necessary? I think it's maybe a very straightforward question, but I think I really want to, you know, hear your take on this.
I think it is necessary. I mean, I think being alone, apart from other people, you would think would be the ideal state for a writer. I don't know anybody who's worked better during this time. I think everyone has just kind of lost their desire.
Yeah.
And I think it's because art is for other people. And if you're not around other people even a little bit, you know, it's hard to know, this activity just folds back in on yourself and kind of dissolves. Why write if there's no gap, you know? Like I feel like art is trying to like bridge a gap or something, or it's trying to like make the gap smaller. But if it's just you alone, what's the gap that you're trying to bridge? So I feel like it's not it's so unnatural, you know, that it's not even that you need the distractions, you just need the interaction. Because also I had this therapist who once said, like, you know, just like we breathe in and breathe out, that's the same thing with art. You need to take things in, and then you, once you have taken in enough, you breathe out and you work. And it was like a time of not breathing in or breathing out, you know. I would even think that reading became a little less fun somehow. I don't know, it was just a very hard, I mean, it was just also just knowing about all the suffering that everybody was going through. Like, it's hard to sit down and work on your book because you're just worried, and you're constantly reading the news and wanting to see what's happening. And I don't know, I felt very outside the world of the imagination. You know, reality was just took over somehow.
And as you said before, like if book are like conversation are like reading. You say things and you hear things. So maybe it's the same movement for books,
Yeah.
for art in general.
Yeah.
And I also read your 2006 to 2010 diaries, and there was this entry that I've been thinking about a lot, like for years, and maybe even resonated in everything I said until now and all my previous question. And the phrase is, all I wanted was a physical life. There is something which I think pertain not much to women per se, but to the way we are more free and maybe more inclined to experience the world, which is through the body. And it's something that also Clarice Lispector said, and Adrienne Rich and Chris Kraus and many others. And I think I can clearly see this also in your work. This is this urge to experience things in your work, to get lost and to feel them. And which is actually the first thing that we have lost, and it's forbidden in this situation even now. And you know, everything that is physical is forbidden, and there is no way around this. So I'd say I have this deep longing right now for everything messy, everything undefined. And so I would like to ask you, how is writing, how is going through things, and how is thinking through things without the possibility of a physical life?
I mean, I think I've found a physical life in this time in a different way. I've become very interested in our sense of smell, and that is physical. And it's one of the senses that we don't, or that I haven't really given much thought to in my life. You know, you think a lot about music or the way things look or art, but something about this time has just made me feel so interested in scent. And you know, I've been buying these like tiny little like perfume samples, and just it's like an art form that I can engage in right now, because you can't go to museums, you can't go to the theater, you can't go to movies. I mean, but this is like I'm realizing, oh, this is an art form that I've just completely not thought about and completely neglected. And it's so powerful. I mean, you know, what scent does to call up memories is more intense than what, you know, none of our senses can call up memories the way that the sense of smell can. I don't know. I feel like I've gone into this whole world that I just overlooked because of all the other art forms had their hold on me. So yeah, I feel like actually it's been like a more physical life in some way, just because of rediscovering this very important, very animal, very primal, like loaded with information sense that I just never gave any thought to, you know.
Okay. So I have prepared this question because I knew the interview was supposed to like last like 15 minutes to 20 minutes. So I'm not sure. Mattia, let us know if it's enough.
Yes, we have done, I guess. And yeah, if you want to, I don't know, say something to like goodbye to everyone, you know, I saluti, insomma.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So, Sheila, thank you very much for this conversation, and I hope that our paths will cross soon, and that we can, you know, continue talking about your diaries and your writings. And thank you for InQuiete. Thank you, InQuiete, for inviting us. And
yeah, thank you so much. It was such a nice conversation. Nice to meet you, and a pleasure. Yeah. And maybe in real life one day.
Yeah,
in our physical life.
I hope so.